So welcome everyone to this part of this wonderful session. I will focus on building your confidence, and I will give you practical tools to figure out how we can take action on that. As Lindsay mentioned, and as I see people and the questions coming in, many of us are or have been in relationships where we were told that we are not enough, or we were just to believe that we are not enough, we are less than, and that has a huge impact on our self confidence, of course. But then, how do we find the courage and the strengths to actually speak up, to take action, find our voice, and also how do we sustain it afterwards? So in the next while, that's what I'm going to talk about, and we will explore 4 approaches that will help you do that. So on the next slide, you see a quote. Yes, thank you. And before we dive even into just discussing what it takes to take action, I'd like you to read this quote, and I will read it for you as well. Men are taught to apologize for their weaknesses, women for their strengths. So I know that many of you are aware that there is definitely a double standard in our society, and that pressure is huge on us, and it affects our confidence. And unfortunately, this is even in 2022, it's even now today is true. And as you know, the experiences we have, the stories we share about ourselves, these all shape us. The remarks that people are making towards us, the things that they say about us, even either when we are there or when we are not there, it really shapes our confidence and how we see ourselves. So why does it matter? Next, Lindsay, please. Let's do an activity, and I'd like you to think about the statements that you have been told. And when you think about those statements, think about it to being, is it an factual statement, or is it something that just people just like saying to you? And is it something that you heard a couple of times? Is it something that you just heard once, or you hear it all the time? Because we know that when you hear these statements about you, there is a chance that you will, with time, internalize them. And that means that you start agreeing with them, you start believing in them. So that's what we want to avoid. So I asked you to think about one negative statement that was directed towards you, and think about it, or if it is a factual statement or not. Is it something that you think you start internalizing, or is it just something that you heard in passing and it doesn't really affect your confidence or self view? And if you feel okay sharing, please put it in the chat, or as Lindsay mentioned before, unmute your mic and share it with us if you feel that this is something that you are ready to share. And I give you an example. For example, somebody told you that you were careless again. In that statement, are you focusing on hearing the again? Are you thinking about that, yeah, I'm always careless, this is what I'm always hearing? Or is it just something that in that situation, you actually were careless, but you are not a careless person? And this conversation is really in our minds, and this is something that a conversation we have with ourselves, but it hugely affects how we see ourselves, how we behave, how we show our confidence. So I'll give you a little bit of time to think about one negative statement. Again, if you would like to write it down for yourself, put it in the chat, share, everything is okay. I'll give you a minute to think about that. So I'm sure all of you have experience, or hopefully not, but all of you have some kind of experience with this, because that's why we are here. We are talking about this. And it's kind of heartbreaking to read what you are sharing in the chat. You're paranoid and needy, not worthy of proper love. Like, these are exactly the expressions that we would like to change that this is not coming towards us. You are controlling, you are too sensitive. Like, being sensitive is actually a positive, but in these relationships, people with this kind of thinking, they can even turn that into something negative, and that's very, very dangerous when you hear it all over time. Stupid is one of the worst words I've always heard about myself. But even with therapy and counseling, it didn't help me to come out of it. So it's drilled in my brain. Yes, that is the biggest danger in hearing these statements all over and over again, that it's just, we can't forget it, we can't unlearn it. But going through this session today, I will give you some tools that will help you slowly, step by step, taking small steps to kind of change that. Who would want to be with someone who is this needy? This isn't a me problem, it's a you issue. Yes, that is always coming up in this discussion, is that the person tries to change things and say that the negative things is coming from you instead of them. So thank you so much for sharing. We'll come back to these statements later in how we work through our methods. Thank you, Christine, for adding that. So let's move on to see what we can do about it. And it starts with taking control. And yes, I know it's easy to say, yeah, just take control. It's not that easy. We all know that. So that's why we need to think about what are the things that we can take control. What are the things that we can actually change. So there are things we all know that we can control. There are things that we can influence, and then there are those things that we can neither control nor influence. And in this strategy that we are talking about, this behavior that we are developing in you now, it's important to focus on those things that you can control. Why? Because those are the things that we can change. So this sounds good. Yeah, I'll just take control of all the things that I can change, but how I can do that? So this is what we will be talking about. But before we dive into that, I also would like to acknowledge that most of the time, this is really tough. It's challenging. It can be emotionally draining, exhausting, and it might not always work. So with these things in mind, we'll turn it to the positive side, of course, with our techniques. But we just have to acknowledge that this is a hard situation, and although you can do something about it, it will be hard for you for sure. Thank you for Nadia for sharing, and Christine to answering those questions and statements. Yeah. So that's where confidence comes in, and that's basically the basis of my session here, is building your confidence, because we all have different experiences. We have our stories, and we know what happened to us. We know the other person in certain relationships, but can we take action? And this is exactly where confidence will help you. You know that you have the power to change your story. You have the power to define your present as well as your future. But in order to do that, you need to have confidence, because that will allow you to take action. And so how are we going to do that? I'd like to provide you in the next slide a structure. And it has four different components, as I mentioned before: discover, envision, act, and learn. The acronym is DIL, so that's perfect. And we will discover all of these four different elements and talk about examples, and you will have the opportunity to share again. But before we start, I just would like to say that if you feel in certain situations, you feel that you are not confident enough, or you feel anxious or insecure, that is absolutely okay. And please don't think that you are broken or weak, or you can't do anything to change because you feel insecure. We all feel insecure at times, and it just really means that you're a human, you care, And I'd like to ask you to let go of that idea that eventually you will reach this unwavering absolute confidence, because probably it's not going to happen, because we are all humans, we are changing all the time. So it's really hard to have that as a vision. We can always improve, of course. So I'd like to ask you just to relax, take a deep breath, and focus on the present, and focus on smaller steps. And we will go through those smaller steps within this framework, but focus on those smaller steps that you can take right now to change things around you. The first part of this is discovery. So we all know that women are resilient, and we know that we bring a unique and special perspective and special strengths and talents and all of that to every conversation, to every relationship we are in. So basically, we all have a superpower. To give you an example, I think that my superpower is, for example, challenging the status quo. Every time I am faced with a new situation, leading a new project or leading a new team, I'm always asking those questions that brings new thinking into the picture. What can I do differently? How can I change things that people's experience is getting better? So I'd like you to think about your superpower. And we will do a really fun activity with this, but I'm just giving you a couple of seconds to think about what is your superpower. And you can have more. You don't necessarily have to have just one. You might have 2 or 3 superpowers. That's also fine. Think about your talents, your strengths, the things that make you really, really proud. But moving on to the next slide is establishing what your superpower is really building your internal confidence, because we all know that sometimes we are looking for external validation, right? We are looking for people to tell us if we did right or good or something like that. And with this program that I'm presenting to you, I'd like to build your internal confidence. I give you an example. When we did the focus group sessions, for example, for asking women when and how they felt confident, a couple of them came up with stories saying like, when I finished my presentation, my colleagues or my boss came to me and they said I did a good job. And this is exactly the looking for external validation. So what I would like you to internalize more is that you don't have to wait for that. In this scenario, for example, after a presentation, you know that you did a good job. And of course, it's nice to hear from others too. I'm not saying don't ask for feedback, but just the first reaction after a situation like this, it's yes, this was great. I did a good job, and just acknowledge it yourself. And then we can move on to the next phase, which is envisioning. So now we established what your superpower is, what your talent strengths are. We have to translate it into a vision. And then this stage, I would like to ask you to dream big. Like, don't think about constraints, barriers, challenges. Just really based on your superpower, think about your vision for the future, what you would like to be seen, how you would like to be seen in the future. And again, you can write it down, you can record it on your phone if you'd like again, but in these statements that you are now telling yourself, and you can also put it in the chat, say things like, I'm happy. I am in a relationship where I am valued, respected, and loved. And always start with I, because that will give you an opportunity to, again, to see yourself in a different perspective. Moving on to the next phase is really the taking action part. So now we have an idea of our superpower. We know what we would like to experience in the future. We are telling all of those nice things to ourselves, but how do we get there? And one of the most important parts of this, this action-orientedness is to think about the people that surround us. because we know that we are in so many different relationships at work, personal life, with so many different people. But if you think about action and acting on what you envision for yourself as a future, one of the first things is to look at your relationships and think about, how can I reduce time in those relationships where I don't feel comfortable, when I don't feel all those things that you shared in the chat that you want to feel, and spend more time in those relationships where people lift you up and give you praise and acknowledge your strengths and talents and acknowledge you as you are. So that's a really important part of taking action. The other one is setting boundaries, because we all have different boundaries, and you probably know what are your trigger points and what your boundaries are. But going back to Maria's point, visualizing, saying it out loud, once you experience a behavior that is not okay with you, for example, if you don't like sarcastic comments directed towards you, then that's not okay, and you are able to speak up and say things. And again, I'm going back to my first comment about this is tough, this is hard for all of us to act like this, but step by step, by taking small steps, we can get there. For example, if you are undermined in spite of always making efforts, that's your boundary. That's where you set the line, and that's where you try to speak up and say something so that it changes. It's about changing behavior. And the first action is actually acknowledging what happens. So in these examples that I just gave you, the first thing that you do is acknowledging that this happened, acknowledging that you feel you need to do something. And it can start just with a facial expression, or just pausing, asking your partner who said those things that you don't want to hear or don't agree with, to ask them, like, tell me more. Why did you say that? Why do you use this word? It's a good start. It's probably not going to change them in the first attempt, but at least you are voicing how you feel and what you think about these. And the other thing is that if we stay silent and if we never say that actually encourages the bad behavior that we would like to change. So that's why it's important to express our opinion, because that's how we start changing behavior around us and in ourselves as well, as we talked about how we talk to ourselves. And then the last part of this strategy is learning. It's about nurturing yourself. It's about sustaining that behavior that you created for yourself and learning from others and from each other. Like support groups like we have this today. This is a safe environment, and I'm so happy that people feel okay sharing. But sharing your experiences and stories, it's really, really important. Building allies around yourself who you can reach out to and help you reach that vision that you have for yourself. And the other good thing about learning from each other is that we kind of all know that giving advice to others, it's so much easier than taking that advice ourselves. So if you have someone in your circles that are in a similar situation, and if you give them advice based on what you think about their relationship, and just saying it out loud, it will make you feel that, oh yeah, this is actually a good advice. Maybe I should take my own advice. And again, this is challenging, and a lot of times it's really hard to get there. But if you think about it in this sense, then I think you will get there. So just going back to the whole circle: discover, envision, act, and learn. As you see, this is not a one-time process. This is something that we do all the time. And the next slide shows you this circle. As you change, as you age, you will discover new talents, new strengths about yourself. And then again, based on those discoveries, you will make new visions for the future, or different ones, a little bit different or very different. And with building your confidence around this, you will be able to act on it and then learn from it. And then the the next slide is really a quote that I would like to leave you with. Our uniqueness isn't a scar, but a beauty mark. What makes us different is also what makes us wildly, boldly, and marvelously who we were born to be. So again, please, this is something that I think we all should internalize. We are unique. We are bringing unique perspectives to our relationships, to our conversations. And if you want to say this out loud as well to yourself and say, my uniqueness isn't a scar, feel free to do that. Do it as many times as you want to hear it yourself, because this is basically the basis of everything, acknowledging that we are unique, we are worthy, we are enough, and just telling these things to ourselves and internalizing. And then lastly, what I would like to offer you is that we have a wonderful organization called Sherocks, and we are focusing on building confidence in women. We have different audiences. So if you ever think about getting involved in a workshop with us, or if you think that we could continue this conversation in a one-on-one setting, we have wonderful coaches available. If you ever need anything like this, please reach out to me on LinkedIn, or check out our website, sherocks.ca, and you can reach us there as well. And again, thank you so much for sharing so much in the chat. It's really, really appreciated.